The wind cut across the ridge like a blade, carrying with it the scent of dust and distant gunpowder. Lieutenant Vera Kensington adjusted her position against the rocky outcrop, her eyes never leaving the valley floor 3,000 meters below. The observation post was little more than a collection of sandbags and camouflage netting, perched on a ridge that most people would consider uninhabitable. But Vera had been in worse places. She pressed the binoculars to her eyes again, tracking the movement of the SEAL team as they advanced through the narrow canyon. 6 men, moving with the practiced efficiency of operators who had done this 1,000 times before. Their mission was straightforward on paper. Extract a high-value target from a compound nestled in the valley, gather intelligence, and exfiltrate before enemy reinforcements could respond. Simple, clean, except nothing was ever simple in this part of the world. Corporal Finch Derringer shifted nervously beside her, his radio crackling with periodic check-ins from the team below. He was young, maybe 22, and this was his first deployment to a forward observation post. Every few minutes, he would glance at Vera as if seeking reassurance that everything was proceeding according to plan. "You doing okay there, Corporal?" Vera asked without lowering her binoculars. "Yes, ma'am," Finch replied, though his voice carried an edge of uncertainty. "Just seems quiet. Too quiet, you know." Vera allowed herself a slight smile. "That is exactly what we want it to be. Quiet means the enemy does not know they are there yet." Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have witnessed situations where someone's skills were overlooked or underestimated in your community. We would love to hear about it. The SEAL team had reached the compound now, and Vera watched as they stacked up against the main entrance. Commander Hollis Brenneman led the breach, his movements precise and controlled. She had seen his file when she had been assigned to this post. Decorated, experienced, demanding. The kind of officer who expected excellence and did not tolerate excuses. He had barely acknowledged her presence during the mission briefing, his attention focused on his team and the tactical elements of the operation. "Support personnel," he had said, glancing briefly in her direction. "You will maintain overwatch from the ridge. Standard observation protocols. Report anything unusual. Stay out of the way." Vera had simply nodded. She was used to it by now. The dismissal. The assumption that support meant incompetent or unimportant. She had stopped trying to correct people years ago. Let them think what they wanted. She had her orders, and she would execute them with the same precision she brought to everything else. The team disappeared into the compound, and the radio chatter increased. "Room clear. Move into second floor. Target acquired." The operation was proceeding smoothly, exactly as planned. Finch relaxed slightly, his shoulders dropping as the tension eased. "See," he said, grinning at Vera. "Nothing to worry about. They will be in and out in 15 minutes. Vera did not respond immediately. Her attention had shifted to the ridgeline opposite their position, roughly 2 kilometers to the east. Something had caught her eye. A glint of metal, perhaps, or maybe just the way the shadows fell across the rocks. She adjusted her binoculars, focusing on the area, her breathing steady and controlled. There. Movement. 3 figures, possibly 4, moving along the ridgeline with tactical spacing. They carried weapons, and they were advancing toward a position that would give them a clear line of sight into the compound. Enemy spotters, or worse, a sniper team setting up to ambush the SEAL extraction. "Finch," she said quietly, her voice calm but urgent. "Get on the radio. Tell Commander Brenneman they have enemy contact approaching from the East Ridge. Multiple hostiles, armed, moving into overwatch position." Finch grabbed the radio, his earlier confidence evaporating. "Command, this is Observation Post Delta. We have visual on enemy forces, East Ridge, approximately 2 clicks from your position. They appear to be setting up an ambush point." The response from Brenneman was immediate and sharp. "Confirm visual. How many hostiles?" For confirmed, Finch replied, glancing at Vera for confirmation. She held up 4 fingers without taking her eyes off the enemy position. "Repeat, 4 hostiles, armed, moving into elevated position overlooking your extraction route. There was a pause on the radio, filled with the crackle of static and the distant sound of activity from inside the compound. Then Brenneman's voice came through again, harder this time. "We are 30 seconds from exfil. Can you confirm if they have acquired our position?" Vera studied the enemy fighters through her binoculars. They had stopped now, setting up what looked like a heavy machine gun on a tripod. One of them was scanning the valley with his own optics. In a few seconds, he would see the SEAL team. In a few seconds more, they would open fire, and 6 highly trained operators would be caught in a kill zone with nowhere to hide. "Negative," Vera said, loud enough for Finch to hear. "They have not acquired yet, but they will in less than 30 seconds. They are setting up a crew-served weapon. Once they open fire, the team will be pinned down with no cover." Finch relayed the message, his voice rising with each word. The radio exploded with activity. Orders being shouted, the sound of boots on stone, the unmistakable tension of men realizing they had walked into a trap. Brenneman was calling for air support, but Vera already knew the answer. The nearest attack helicopter was 20 minutes out. The SEAL team did not have 20 minutes. They barely had 20 seconds. Vera's mind was already calculating. Distance to target, wind speed, elevation difference, the curvature of the Earth at extreme range. Numbers and variables that most people would need a computer to process. But for her, they came as naturally as breathing. The enemy machine gun team was 2,000 meters away, positioned on unstable ground with limited cover. Not an impossible shot, but far from easy, especially with the equipment she had been issued for this support assignment. Corporal Finch was practically shouting into the radio now, his composure completely shattered. "Commander, they are about to open fire. What are your orders? What do we do?" Brenneman's voice crackled back, tight with controlled fury. "We are moving to alternate extraction point. Keep eyes on those hostiles. If they shift position, I need to know immediately." Vera watched as the SEAL team broke from the compound, moving fast toward a dried riverbed that offered minimal concealment. The enemy fighters had seen them now. She could tell by the way they adjusted their weapon, training it down toward the valley floor. The gunner settled into position behind the heavy machine gun, his finger moving toward the trigger. In 3 seconds, maybe 4, he would open fire. The SEALs would be cut down before they made it 10 meters. She turned her gear, moving with practiced efficiency. The rifle they had issued her was a standard M4 carbine, adequate for defensive purposes, but completely wrong for what she was considering. Beneath her sleeping bag, wrapped in a weatherproof case that officially did not exist, was something else entirely. A rifle she had brought with her despite regulations, despite orders, despite the looks she would get if anyone found out. An M110 semi-automatic sniper rifle, customized to her exact specifications, zeroed at ranges that most marksmen considered fantasy. "What are you doing?" Finch asked, his eyes widening as she unwrapped the case. "That is not authorized equipment. If the commander finds out." Vera ignored him, her hands moving with muscle memory built over thousands of hours. She extended the bipod, checked the scope, and chambered around in one fluid motion. The rifle settled against her shoulder like an old friend, familiar and reliable. She adjusted her breathing, slowing her heart rate, letting the chaos around her fade into background noise. "Lieutenant, you cannot just..." Finch started, but his words died as he saw her face. There was something in her expression, a cold certainty that made him take a step back. This was not the quiet support officer who had been content to watch and report. This was someone else entirely. The wind was gusting from the west at roughly 12 miles per hour, adding a lateral component she would need to account for. The temperature differential between the ridge and the valley would affect the bullet's trajectory. The target was moving slightly, adjusting his position behind the machine gun. Vera calculated the lead, the drop, the drift. 2.3 seconds of flight time. She would have to fire before he did, trusting that her bullet would arrive first. Through her scope, she could see everything with crystal clarity. The enemy gunner's face, concentrated and determined, his finger on the trigger. Below, in the valley, Commander Brenneman and his team sprinting for cover they would never reach in time. Chief Petty Officer Garrett Lindstrom bringing up the rear, covering their withdrawal with his rifle raised. All of them about to die because they were caught in the open with nowhere to hide. Vera's finger rested lightly on the trigger. She had made shots like this before, dozens of them, in conditions far worse than these. But those had been in another life, in another assignment, before the bureaucracy and the politics had decided that her particular skill set was too controversial for active operations. Before they had decided that support duty was a more appropriate role for someone with a profile. Before they had taken away everything she had worked for and replaced it with a pair of binoculars and a radio. The gunner's finger tightened on the trigger. Vera exhaled slowly and squeezed. The rifle's report echoed across the valley, a sharp crack that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. The recoil was familiar, manageable, exactly what she expected. Through the scope, she tracked the bullet's path, watching as it covered 2,000 meters in the time it took her heart to beat twice. The enemy gunner's head snapped back, and he collapsed behind a machine gun, his body going instantly limp. The other fighters froze, confusion and panic spreading through their small group as they tried to comprehend what had just happened. Finch stared at her, his mouth hanging open. That was... How did you? Vera was already working the bolt, chambering another round. The remaining enemy fighters were scrambling now, abandoning their position and retreating along the ridgeline. She tracked the nearest one, compensating for his movement, and fired again. He went down. The other two broke into a full run, disappearing into the rocks before she could line up another shot. Down in the valley, the SEAL team had reached the dried riverbed and taken cover. The radio crackled to life, and Commander Brenneman's voice came through, harder and more demanding than before. Observation Post Delta, report. Who fired those shots? Identify yourself immediately. Vera lowered her rifle, her breathing still calm and controlled. She reached for the radio, taking it from Finch's trembling hands. Observation Post Delta. 2 hostile targets eliminated. Remaining hostiles have retreated from position. Your extraction route is clear. There was a long pause. When Brenneman spoke again, his voice carried an edge of disbelief mixed with barely contained anger. I did not authorize engagement. I asked who fired those shots. Identify yourself by name and rank. Lieutenant Vera Kensington, support personnel, observation post Delta, she replied evenly. 2 confirmed kills at approximately 2,000 meters. Enemy machine gun team neutralized before they could engage her position. Another pause, longer this time. Vera could almost hear the wheels turning in Brenneman's mind. A support officer, making kills at 2,000 meters, with unauthorized equipment, saving his team from an ambush they had walked directly into. None of it made sense according to the neat categories he was used to working with. Lieutenant Kensington, Brenneman said slowly, his tone cold and controlled. Remain at your position. When we complete extraction, I'm coming up there personally. We need to have a conversation about protocols, chain of command, and unauthorized weapons discharge. Understood, Commander, Vera replied. She set down the radio and began breaking down her rifle, wrapping it carefully back in its case. Finch watched her with something between awe and terror, clearly unsure whether she had just saved the day or ended her career. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the valley. Somewhere below, 6 Navy SEALs were alive because she had broken every rule in the book. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Vera knew that the easy part was over. Now came a hard part, explaining to Commander Hollis Brenneman exactly who she was and why a support officer had a custom sniper rifle and the skills to use it at ranges that most people considered impossible. The extraction took another 40 minutes. Vera watched through her binoculars as the SEAL team moved methodically through the valley, clearing their route and ensuring no additional threats lurked in the shadows. They moved differently now, she noticed, more cautiously. The confidence that had characterized their initial approach had been replaced by the wariness of men who understood how close they had come to disaster. Finch had barely spoken since the shots were fired. He sat against the sandbags, his rifle across his lap, stealing glances at Vera every few minutes, as if she might suddenly transform into something else entirely. When he finally found his voice, it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked. Vera continued scanning the valley, her expression unchanged. "Various places, over a lot of years. But support personnel do not. We are not supposed to." Finch trailed off, clearly struggling to reconcile what he had witnessed with everything he thought he knew about military assignments and protocols. "No," Vera agreed. "We are not." The radio crackled. "Observation Post Delta. This is Commander Brenneman. We are beginning ascent to your position. ETA 20 minutes. Ensure the area is secure." Vera acknowledged and began preparing for their arrival. She checked the perimeter, confirmed no additional threats were visible, and made sure her unauthorized rifle was secured in its case. There was no point in hiding it now. Brenneman would demand to see it, would demand answers to questions she had spent the last 3 years avoiding. The comfortable anonymity of support duty was about to evaporate, and she was not entirely certain how she felt about that. The sound of boots on rock announced their arrival before she saw them. Commander Brenneman crested the ridge first, his face set in hard lines that suggested he had spent the entire climb working himself into a controlled fury. Behind him came Chief Petty Officer Garrett Lindstrom and 3 other SEALs, all of them looking at the observation post with new interest. These were not the casual glances they had given it during the initial mission briefing. These were the careful, assessing looks of operators who had just had their lives saved by someone they had dismissed as irrelevant. Brenneman stopped 5 feet from Vera, his eyes moving from her face to the rifle case and back again. His jaw was tight, and when he spoke, each word was clipped and precise. "Lieutenant Kensington, I believe we have several things to discuss." "Yes, sir," Vera replied, standing at attention. Her voice remained calm, professional, exactly as it had been throughout the entire operation. "Let's start with the most obvious question," Brenneman continued. "Where did you acquire that rifle, and why was it not listed on your equipment manifest when you were assigned to this post?" "The rifle is personal property, Commander. I brought it with me when I transferred to this duty station. It was not listed because support personnel are not typically authorized to carry precision weapons." Brenneman's eyes narrowed. "So you smuggled unauthorized equipment into a forward observation post, in direct violation of standing orders regarding personal weapons." "I brought the tools necessary to complete my mission," Vera replied evenly. "Your mission profile indicated a possibility of enemy activity in this sector. I assessed that standard support equipment might prove inadequate under certain circumstances." "Inadequate," Brenneman repeated, and there was something dangerous in his tone now. "You assessed. You, a support officer with no combat authorization, decided that you knew better than the mission planners and brought a custom sniper rifle to what was supposed to be a routine observation assignment." "With respect, Commander," Vera said, meeting his gaze directly, "it stopped being routine the moment that machine gun team appeared on the East Ridge. If I had followed standard protocols and simply observed and reported, you and your men would be dead right now." The words hung in the air between them. Several of the SEALs shifted uncomfortably. Lindstrom, the chief petty officer, cleared his throat but said nothing. Brenneman's face had gone dangerously still, the kind of quiet that preceded either violence or a career-ending reprimand. "You are correct, Lieutenant," Brenneman said finally, his voice dropping to something just above a whisper. "My men would be dead, which is why I am standing here having this conversation instead of filing charges immediately. But do not mistake my gratitude for approval of your methods. You violated direct orders. You engaged enemy targets without authorization. You used personal equipment in a combat zone. Any one of those infractions is grounds for court-martial." Vera said nothing. There was nothing to say. Everything he stated was factually accurate. She had broken the rules, had known she was breaking them, and had done it anyway because 6 lives were worth more than her career. It was a calculation she had made before in other places, under other circumstances. It was one of the reasons she was in support duty to begin with. Lindstrom stepped forward, his weathered face thoughtful. "Commander, if I may, that first shot, the one that took down the gunner, That was at least 2,000 meters in gusting wind with a moving target. I have been doing this for 18 years, and I have seen maybe 5 people in my entire career who could make that shot. Who are you, Lieutenant? Just support personnel, Chief, Vera replied. Brenneman held up a hand, cutting off whatever Lindstrom was about to say. He pulled out a tablet from his tactical vest and began scrolling through files. His eyes scanned the screen, and Vera watched as his expression shifted from anger to confusion to something that might have been recognition. Kensington, he said slowly. Vera Kensington. Why does that name sound familiar? He continued scrolling, then stopped. His eyes widened fractionally before his professional mask slammed back into place. He looked up at her, and there was a new quality to his gaze now. Caution, respect, and beneath it all, disbelief. You are that Kensington, the one from Afghanistan, the one who held off an entire Taliban assault for 6 hours while your unit evacuated wounded, the one who has the record for confirmed long-range kills in theater. Vera's expression did not change. I was in Afghanistan. Yes, sir. The one they called Ghost, Brenneman continued, his voice quiet now. The one who trained half the sniper instructors at Fort Benning. The one who was being groomed for Tier 1 operations before. He stopped, clearly catching himself. Before you were reassigned to support duty. The ridge fell silent, except for the wind. The other SEALs were staring now, recognition dawning on their faces. Even Finch had gone pale, realizing exactly who he had been sitting next to for the past 3 days. So the question becomes, Brenneman said, putting away his tablet, why is one of the most accomplished snipers in the United States military sitting on a ridge with binoculars and a radio, pretending to be ordinary support personnel? Vera remained silent for a long moment, weighing her options. She could deflect, could give the standard answer about following orders and accepting her assignment without question. But Brenneman was not a fool, and the look in his eyes suggested he would not accept anything less than the truth, or at least enough of it to satisfy his curiosity. There was an incident, she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. 3 years ago, a mission that went sideways. Decisions were made under pressure. Not everyone agreed with those decisions afterward. What kind of incident? Brenneman pressed. The kind that saves lives, but looks bad in an after-action report, Vera replied. The kind where you do what needs to be done, and then spend the next 6 months being interviewed by people who are not there. The kind that ends with reassignment to support duty while the bureaucrats decide whether you are an asset or a liability. Lindstrom let out a low whistle. You disobeyed orders in the field. A modified orders based on real-time intelligence, Vera corrected. There is a difference. Not according to the people writing the reports, Brenneman said, but there was less anger in his voice now. More understanding. He had been in the field long enough to know that sometimes the right tactical decision and the right political decision were not the same thing. So they buried you in support assignments, kept you away from operations, made sure your particular skill set would not cause any more complications. Something like that, Vera agreed. She gestured toward the valley below. But skill sets have a way of being relevant regardless of official assignments. Your team needed someone who could make that shot. I can make that shot. The rest is just paperwork. One of the other SEALs, a younger operator with a fresh scar across his jaw, spoke up. Ma'am, I was the one in the back. The one who would have been first in the gun's line of fire. That machine gun would have cut me in half before I made it 3 steps. Whatever paperwork put you here, whatever incident got you reassigned, I do not care. You saved my life. Thank you. Vera nodded acknowledgement, but said nothing. Gratitude made her uncomfortable, always had. She had not made the shot for thanks or recognition. She had made it because it was the shot that needed to be made, and she was the only one in position to make it. Simple mathematics. Simple necessity. Brenneman was studying her with renewed interest, clearly recalculating his entire assessment of the situation. The anger had not completely disappeared, but it had been joined by something else. Calculation, professional curiosity, the look of a commander who had just discovered an unexpected asset. How long have you been at this support post? He asked. 3 weeks, Vera replied. I rotate between several observation positions in this sector. Standard 6-month deployment. 5 months and 1 week remaining. And in those 3 weeks, have you engaged any other targets? No, sir. Standard observation and reporting only. Until today, there had been no need for direct engagement. Brenneman glanced at Lindstrom, and some unspoken communication passed between them. The chief petty officer gave a slight nod, and Brenneman turned back to Vera. "Here's my problem, Lieutenant," he said. "By all rights, I should report this incident through proper channels. Document the unauthorized weapon, the violation of engagement protocols, the entire situation. That report would land on several desks, get reviewed by people who care more about regulations and results, and you would probably end up facing disciplinary action." Again, "Yes, sir," Vera said. "That is the likely outcome. However," Brenneman continued, "I am also a practical man. My team is alive because you were here and because you had the tools and training to do what needed to be done. That machine gun team knew we were coming. Someone leaked our mission details, or we were under surveillance we did not detect. Either way, this operation has been compromised, and we are in hostile territory with potentially more threats we do not know about." He paused, his eyes locked on hers. "We have 3 more objectives in this sector over the next 4 days. High-value targets that need to be eliminated or captured. Intel suggests increased enemy activity and heightened security. My team is good, but we just got blindsided by an ambush we should have seen coming. We need better overwatch. We need someone who can do more than observe and report. We need someone who can engage threats before they become critical." "You are asking me to provide sniper support for your operations," Vera said, making sure she understood exactly what he was proposing. "I am asking you to continue doing your assigned job," Brenneman replied with a slight smile. "Observation and reporting. If circumstances require you to engage threats in defense of friendly forces, well, that falls under reasonable force protection measures. I cannot officially authorize you to operate as a sniper, because that would require paperwork that neither of us wants to deal with. But I can request enhanced Overwatch support from your observation post for our remaining operations in this sector." It was a careful dance around regulations, giving her permission without actually giving it, allowing her to operate while maintaining plausible deniability for both of them. It was exactly the kind of creative interpretation that had gotten Vera in trouble before, but it was also the only way to make use of her skills without triggering another bureaucratic nightmare. "What about the unauthorized weapon?" Vera asked. Brenneman shrugged. "I did not see any unauthorized weapon. I saw a support officer using appropriate defensive equipment to protect friendly forces from enemy attack. If your equipment manifest was incomplete, that is an administrative oversight we can address after the mission is complete. Right now, I have bigger concerns than paperwork." Lindstrom grinned. "Besides, if anyone asks, we will all testify that you saved our lives with incredible marksmanship and quick thinking. Pretty hard to discipline someone for heroism, even if the methods were unorthodox." Vera considered the offer. It was risky. If things went wrong again, if another incident occurred that required investigation and review, she could face serious consequences. But the alternative was sitting on this ridge for 5 more months, watching through binoculars while other people fought and died, pretending that her skills and training were irrelevant. She had not joined the military to be irrelevant. "Understood, Commander," she said. "I will provide enhanced Overwatch support for your remaining operations. If threats emerge that require direct engagement, I will take appropriate action in defense of friendly forces." "Excellent," Brenneman said. He extended his hand, and Vera shook it. The grip was firm, professional, the handshake of 2 people who understood they were bending rules for practical necessity. "We move on the next objective in 18 hours. I will have my comms specialist provide you with encrypted frequencies and operation details. Lindstrom will coordinate positioning and timing." "One more thing," Lieutenant Brenneman added, his expression growing serious. "That shot you made today, 2,000 meters in wind with a moving target. That was not luck. That was skill at a level most people will never achieve. Whatever incident put you in support duty, whatever decisions you made that look bad on paper, just know that my team is alive because of your training and judgment. That counts for something." The next 18 hours passed in careful preparation. Lindstrom climbed back up to the observation post after dark, carrying encrypted communication equipment and detailed mission briefs. He spread the maps across the sandbags while Vera studied them under red-filtered light that would not compromise their night vision. "The next target is here," Lindstrom explained, pointing to a compound 15 kilometers to the north. "High-value target, intelligence officer coordinating enemy movements in this sector. He has been slippery, moves locations frequently, but we have solid intel he will be at this compound tomorrow morning for a meeting with local commanders." Vera examined the terrain. The compound sat in a narrow valley surrounded by high ridges, natural choke points that could easily become kill zones. "Smart defensive position," she observed. "Multiple escape routes, elevated positions for security. He chose well, which is why we need you," Lindstrom said. "Standard approach would be a night insertion, breach at dawn when security is lowest. But after today's ambush, the commander is concerned about walking into another trap. He wants eyes on that compound for 12 hours before we move. He wants to know every fighter, every weapon, every position. And if things go bad again, he wants someone who can reach out and touch problems from a distance." Vera traced potential shooting positions on the map. "The northern ridge offers best line of sight, but it is exposed. Eastern approach has better concealment, but limited angles." She calculated distances, wind patterns, approach routes. "I will need to be in position by midnight. That gives me time to establish proper concealment and conduct pre-dawn reconnaissance." Lindstrom nodded. "We will insert at 0400. If all goes according to plan, you'll never need to fire a shot. But if you do, the commander wants you to have full tactical autonomy. You see a threat, you eliminate it. No waiting for authorization." "That is a significant departure from standard protocols," Vera said, meeting his eyes. "He has given me a lot of trust." "You earn it today," Lindstrom replied simply. "Besides, after I got back to base, I did some research. Called in some favors, talked to people who know people. Your reputation precedes you, Lieutenant. The incident that got you reassigned, I heard the real story, not the sanitized version in the official reports." Vera's expression remained neutral, but something tightened in her chest. "And what story did you hear?" "That you were advising an Afghan commando unit during a village clearing operation. Intel said the village was empty. Enemy forces had withdrawn. But you saw something that did not fit, noticed patterns that suggested an ambush. You called for the operation to abort, but the Afghan commander overruled you, said his sources confirmed it was safe. You had two choices: follow orders and watch those commandos walk into a kill zone, or take action. You took action," Lindstrom continued. "Put 3 rounds through the walls of buildings where you had identified enemy positions. Killed 2 fighters who were waiting in ambush. Caused the rest to panic and reveal themselves. Saved the entire commando unit from annihilation. But the Afghan government complained about damaged property and civilian buildings being fired upon. Never mind that those buildings were full of enemy fighters. Never mind that you saved 30 lives. The paperwork said you engaged targets without visual confirmation and destroyed civilian property without authorization." Vera was quiet for a moment. "The official investigation concluded that my actions, while effective, demonstrated poor judgment and insufficient respect for host nation sensitivities. I was removed from advisory duties and reassigned to support roles where my particular approach to problem-solving would be less likely to create diplomatic incidents." "Diplomatic incidents," Lindstrom repeated with barely concealed disgust. "You mean saving lives in ways that make politicians uncomfortable?" He shook his head. "Commander Brenneman read the same reports I did. He knows what kind of operator you are. The kind who sees what needs to be done and does it, regardless of consequences. That is exactly what we need right now." After Lindstrom departed, Vera began her preparations. She broke down her rifle completely, cleaning and inspecting every component. She checked ammunition, confirmed 0 on her scope, and packed her gear with the methodical precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times. Finch watched from the corner, still processing everything he had learned over the past day. "You are really going out there alone," he said, "into hostile territory, in the dark, to sit on a ridge for for 12 hours. That is the job, Corporal, Vera replied without looking up from her work. But what if something goes wrong? What if enemy forces find your position? You will be by yourself, no backup, no support. Then I will deal with it, Vera said, just like I always have. She finished her preparations and checked her watch. 2,300 hours. Time to move. She gathered her gear, secured her rifle case, and stood. Finch rose as well, his young face troubled. "Lieutenant," he said hesitantly, "for what it is worth, I'm glad you are the one providing overwatch. I would not trust anyone else." Vera allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, Corporal. Keep monitoring the radio frequencies. If things go wrong tomorrow, you may need to coordinate casualty evacuation or call in reinforcements." "Yes, ma'am," Finch replied, squaring his shoulders. He was still young, still learning, but there was determination in his eyes now. A recognition that support personnel could be just as critical as the operators on the ground. The descent from the observation post was slow and careful. Vera moved through the darkness with practiced silence, her night vision equipment turning the landscape into shades of green. She had memorized the route during daylight, marked the safe paths and danger areas. 15 kilometers in rough terrain, while carrying 40 pounds of gear would take most soldiers 5 hours. She planned to do it in 3. The night was alive with sounds. Distant animals, wind through rocks, the occasional crack of stone cooling after the day's heat. But beneath those natural sounds, Vera listened for anything artificial. Voices, equipment, vehicles. The enemy was out here somewhere, and after the ambush earlier today, they would be alert and searching. 2 hours into her movement, she froze. Voices ahead, speaking in hushed tones. She dropped into a shallow depression and waited, controlling her breathing, her hand near her sidearm. 2 fighters passed 30 meters to her left, patrolling the ridge line. They were alert but not systematic, talking quietly about the attack that afternoon. About the sniper who had killed their comrades from impossible distance. About increased security and orders to watch for American forces. They passed without detecting her, and Vera waited another 10 minutes before continuing. The enemy was active, organized, and aware that someone dangerous was operating in their territory. That complicated things. It also confirmed that Brenneman's concerns about compromised operations were justified. Someone was feeding information to the enemy, helping them prepare ambushes and position their forces. She reached her planned position at 0200, 2 hours before the SEAL team would begin their insertion. The northern ridge offered a commanding view of the target compound below. She could see guards patrolling, lights in several buildings, vehicles parked in a defensive formation. This was not a sleeping village. This was an alert, prepared enemy position. Vera began constructing her hide, using natural materials and camouflage to create a position that would be invisible from more than 10 feet away. She settled in, arranged her rifle, and began the long process of observation and documentation. Counting guards, noting shift changes, identifying weapons and defensive positions. Building a complete picture of what the SEAL team would face when dawn arrived. Dawn came slowly, painting the valley in shades of gray and gold. Vera had been in position for 4 hours, her body absolutely still, her breathing controlled and rhythmic. Through her scope, she had watched the compound transform from a dark fortress into a busy military installation. Guard shifts had changed twice. 3 vehicles had arrived, carrying additional fighters. And in the central building, lights had been burning continuously since 0300. The high-value target was definitely there. She had glimpsed him twice through windows, a tall man with a distinctive gray beard, gesturing animatedly while speaking to subordinates. Intelligence officer, coordinator, planner. The kind of enemy who was worth 10 regular fighters because of what he knew and who he could direct. Her radio clicked twice. The SEAL team's signal that they were beginning their approach. Vera keyed her microphone once in acknowledgement, then returned to observation. Through her scope, she tracked every movement in the compound. 16 fighters now, all armed, most of them positioned defensively around the perimeter. Heavy machine gun on the northern wall. 2 vehicles with mounted weapons. This would not be an easy extraction. Overwatch, this is command. Brenneman's voice came through her earpiece, barely above a whisper. Request status update on compound security. Command, this is Overwatch, Vera replied softly. Count 16 hostile fighters. Increased since last report. Heavy weapon emplacement north wall, 2 technical vehicles south side. Guard rotation suggests heightened alert status. Recommend extreme caution on approach. There was a pause. Copy that, Overwatch. We are adjusting approach vector. Continue observation and report any changes. Vera watched as the SEAL team moved like shadows through the pre-dawn darkness. Approaching from the eastern ravine, where she had suggested the terrain offered best concealment. They were good, incredibly disciplined, but the compound's defensive posture suggested someone had warned them. Again, this was not normal village security. This was a hardened position expecting attack. Movement on the western ridge caught her attention. She shifted her scope and felt her stomach tighten. For fighters climbing into elevated positions with heavy weapons and spotting scopes. They were setting up Overwatch of their own, positioning themselves to catch anyone approaching the compound in crossfire. The SEALs had no idea they were there. Command, Overwatch, Vera transmitted urgently. You have hostile Overwatch positions forming on Western Ridge, approximately 800 meters from your approach vector. For fighters with crew-served weapons, they will have clear line of sight on your route in approximately 3 minutes. Brenneman's response was immediate. Can you engage? Vera was already adjusting her position, calculating angles and distances. Western Ridge targets are 800 meters from my position, clear line of sight, minimal wind. I can engage, but it will compromise my position and alert the compound to sniper presence. Do it, Brenneman ordered. We cannot advance with that Overwatch in place. Take them down. Vera settled behind her rifle, her breathing slowing to the rhythm she had practiced 10,000 times. The first target was the spotter, a man with binoculars scanning the valley below. She placed the crosshairs center mass, compensated for the slight downward angle, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, the man collapsed, and before his body hit the ground, she was already transitioning to the second target. The gunner on the heavy weapon looked up in confusion just as her second shot caught him in the chest. He fell backward, and chaos erupted on the western ridge. The remaining 2 fighters scrambled for cover, trying to identify where the shots had come from. Vera fired again, missing as her target dove behind rocks, then adjusted and caught him as he tried to relocate. 3 down. The 4th fighter had disappeared into a crevice, and Vera waited with predatory patience. 10 seconds. 20. Then he made his mistake, rising slightly to peer over the rocks. Her 4th shot ended the threat permanently. Western Ridge is clear, she transmitted. All hostile Overwatch eliminated. But the compound is now alerted to sniper presence. They know someone is out here. Below, the compound had transformed into organized chaos. Fighters were running to defensive positions, weapons being trained on the surrounding ridges, orders being shouted. The element of surprise was completely gone. Brenneman's voice came through tight with controlled tension. Overwatch, we are compromised. They're searching for you. Can you relocate? Vera was already breaking down her position, gathering essential gear while keeping her rifle ready. Negative, command. Any movement now will draw attention. I am concealed but stationary. If they conduct systematic sweep of this ridge, they will find me eventually. She watched as fighters began climbing the northern ridge, moving in her direction with weapons ready. They were maybe 600 meters away and closing. Professional search pattern, overlapping fields of fire. These were not amateurs. How many searching for you? Brenneman asked. Count 8 fighters moving up the north ridge toward my position, Vera replied. Another 6 holding perimeter around compound. Your target is still inside central building, but he is preparing to evacuate. You have maybe 5 minutes before he is gone. Through her scope, she could see the graybeard intelligence officer being hustled toward one of the vehicles by a security detail. If he escaped, all the intelligence he carried would disappear with him. The entire operation would be a failure. But the SEAL team was still 800 meters from the compound, and with all the alerted security, a frontal assault would be suicide. Command, the target is moving to vehicle for evacuation, Vera transmitted. You will not reach him in time with conventional approach. Understood, Brenneman replied, and she could hear the frustration in his voice. All units, prepare to withdraw. Mission is compromised. Vera watched the fighters climbing toward her position. 400 meters now. She had maybe 3 minutes before they would be close enough to spot her hide, regardless of how good her camouflage was. The smart play was to withdraw, slip away before they could pin her down, live to fight another day. That was what her support assignment called for. Observe and report. Avoid direct engagement when outnumbered. Survive. But the target was climbing into the vehicle now, his security team scanning the area nervously. In 30 seconds, he would be gone. All the intelligence about enemy operations, all the coordination networks, all the planned ambushes and attacks would drive away and disappear into the mountains. How many coalition soldiers would die because this man remained free to plan and coordinate? Command, Overwatch, Vera transmitted. I have clear shot on the target. Request authorization to engage. There was a long pause. Negative, Overwatch. Your position is compromised. Engaging will reveal your exact location to 8 hostiles who are actively hunting you. Withdraw now while you still can. Vera's finger rested lightly on the trigger. The target was 750 meters away, partially obscured by the vehicle, but still visible. Not an easy shot, but far from impossible. The fighters searching for her were 300 meters out. If she fired, they would pinpoint her location immediately. She would have maybe 90 seconds to relocate before they closed in with superior numbers. Command, if I do not engage, he escapes. Mission fails. How many operations will he coordinate? How many ambushes will he plan? Another pause, longer this time. Lieutenant, I am ordering you to withdraw. That is a direct order. Vera watched the target through her scope. He was gesturing to his driver, clearly about to leave. In 10 seconds, maybe 15, he would be in the vehicle and gone. She thought about the machine gun team from yesterday, the ambush that had nearly killed Brenneman and his men. She thought about the patrol she had encountered last night, the increased security, the coordinated defensive positions. All of it traced back to this man and his intelligence networks. The fighters searching for her were 250 meters away now, close enough that she could hear their voices calling to each other as they advanced. Vera made her decision. She centered the crosshairs, compensated for distance and the slight breeze, and fired. The target dropped, his security team diving for cover as they tried to identify the shooter's position. The fighters on the ridge began running toward her location, their search pattern abandoned in favor of direct assault. Target eliminated, Vera transmitted calmly. She was already moving, breaking down her rifle and gathering gear. I am relocating to secondary position. Request extraction support when able. Brenneman's voice exploded through her earpiece. Damn it, Lieutenant. I ordered you to withdraw. Now you have 8 hostiles converging on your position and no backup. Vera was sliding down the backside of the ridge, using terrain to mask her movement. Understood, Command. But the target is dead and his intelligence network is decapitated. I will evade and extract independently. Continue your mission. She could hear the fighters cresting the ridge behind her, shouting as they found her abandoned hide position. They would realize quickly that she had moved, would begin tracking her. But she had a 2-minute head start, and she knew this terrain better than they did. It would be enough. It had to be enough. The terrain worked in her favor initially. The backside of the ridge was steep and rocky, filled with crevices and broken ground that made pursuit difficult. Vera moved quickly but carefully, using every bit of cover, leaving minimal tracks. Behind her, she could hear the fighters spreading out, calling to each other as they attempted to establish a search perimeter. They were angry now, motivated by the death of their commander and the humiliation of being outmaneuvered by a single sniper. She keyed her radio as she moved. Command, Overwatch. I am heading southwest toward the dry riverbed coordinates we discussed during planning. Estimate 20 minutes to reach concealment if I can maintain current pace. Brenneman's voice was cold. We are moving to intercept. Hold position at the riverbed. Do not, I repeat, do not engage any additional hostiles. You have done enough damage for one day. Vera did not respond. There was nothing to say that would not make the situation worse. She had disobeyed a direct order, eliminated a high-value target, and now had 8 enemy fighters hunting her through hostile territory. By any reasonable military standard, she had exceeded her authority and created an extraction nightmare. But the target was dead, and that had to count for something. The dry riverbed was still 15 minutes away when she heard the distinctive sound of a helicopter in the distance. Not Coalition. The engine signature was wrong, and it was coming from the direction of the compound. The enemy was bringing in aerial support to help search for her. That changed everything. From the ground, she could evade 8 fighters using terrain and concealment. From the air, her heat signature would be visible within minutes once they established a search pattern. Command, Overwatch, she transmitted. Enemy helicopter inbound, likely equipped with thermal imaging. I need to reach cover with overhead concealment or they will acquire me from the air. There was a burst of static, then Lindstrom's voice. Overwatch, Chief here. There is a cave system approximately 300 meters west of your current position. Not on standard maps, but local guides reported it during our initial reconnaissance. Can you reach it? Vera adjusted her course, climbing over a rocky outcrop that tore her gear. 300 meters. She could cover that in 4 minutes if the ground cooperated. The helicopter was getting closer, its rotors echoing off the valley walls. Behind her, the fighters had found her trail and were closing the gap, moving faster now that they had a direction to follow. She pushed harder, her lungs burning, sweat stinging her eyes despite the cool morning air. The cave system better be there, because she was running out of options. No way to outrun a helicopter. No way to hide from thermal imaging in open terrain. The cave was her only chance. 200 meters. The helicopter crested the ridge behind her, and she heard shouting as the fighters spotted it and began directing the pilot toward her last known position. 100 meters. The rocky ground gave way to a steep slope covered in loose scree that threatened to slide out from under her boots with every step. 50 meters. She could see it now, a dark opening partially concealed by fallen boulders. The helicopter was banking toward her, the pilot following directions from the fighters below. 20 meters. The downdraft from the rotors was kicking up dust and debris, making it hard to see. 10 meters. She dove through the opening just as the helicopter passed overhead, its thermal camera scanning the area. The cave interior was cool and dark, extending back into the mountain further than she could see. Vera pressed herself against the wall and waited, controlling her breathing, listening as the helicopter circled above. The radio crackled. Overwatch, did you make it to cover? Affirmative, Command. I am the cave system. Helicopter is circling, but has not indicated they have acquired my heat signature. Cave walls are providing thermal concealment. Good, Brenneman replied. Now sit tight. We are 15 minutes from your position. Do not engage the enemy forces searching for you. That is a direct order, Lieutenant. Do you understand? Understood, Command. Vera leaned back against the cave wall, finally allowing herself a moment to assess her situation. She had her rifle, approximately 200 rounds of ammunition, her sidearm, water, and minimal supplies. The cave provided concealment, but also trapped her. If the enemy discovered the entrance, she would have nowhere to retreat. Outside, she could hear the fighters arguing. Their voices carried through the cave opening, discussing where she could have gone, debating whether to continue searching or wait for additional support. Then one voice, louder than the others, gave an order in the local dialect. They were going to search every cave and crevice in the area. Systematically, methodically. They knew she was here somewhere, and they had the numbers and time to find her. Vera moved deeper into the cave, using her night vision equipment to navigate. The passage narrowed, then opened into a larger chamber. Another passage led off to the left, and she could feel air moving through it. Secondary exit, possibly, or just a dead end that went deeper into the mountain. She had no way to know without exploring, and no time to conduct a proper reconnaissance. The sound of boots on stone announced that the fighters had reached the cave entrance. They were being cautious, calling out to each other, using flashlights to probe the darkness. Vera found a position behind a rock formation that offered concealment while still giving her line of sight to the main passage. She switched off her night vision and let her eyes adjust to the darkness. If they came deeper into the cave, they would be silhouetted against the entrance, easy targets. But engaging them would reveal her position and potentially draw more fighters. "Command, Overwatch," she whispered into her radio. "Enemy forces are entering the cave system. 3 contacts confirmed, possibly more outside. If they continue their search pattern, contact is inevitable." Brenneman's response was immediate. "We are 10 minutes out. Can you avoid contact for 10 minutes? Vera watched as the flashlight beams probed deeper into the cave. The fighters were being methodical, checking every shadow, every possible hiding spot. They would reach her position in less than 5 minutes. "Negative, Command. They are conducting systematic search. I can withdraw deeper into the cave system, but I do not know if there is a secondary exit. If I get trapped in a dead end, extraction becomes significantly more complicated." "Hold position," Brenneman ordered. "We will create a diversion at the cave entrance when we arrive. Draw them out so you can slip past." Vera considered this. It could work, but it relied on timing and coordination. If the SEAL team arrived too late, or if the fighters found her first, the entire plan fell apart. And if shooting started inside the cave, the confined space would make accuracy difficult for everyone involved. The flashlight beams were getting closer. She could hear their voices now, one of them insisting they should go deeper, another arguing they should wait for more support. The debate saved her for maybe 90 seconds, but then the more aggressive voice won out. They were coming deeper. Vera's hand moved to her sidearm. The rifle would be too loud in the confined space, too obvious. If she had to engage, it would be close quarters work with the pistol. Quick, quiet, and absolutely necessary. She counted their footsteps, judging distances in the darkness. 3 of them, moving in single file, flashlights sweeping side to side. The lead fighter was 20 feet away when the radio crackled. "Overwatch, Command. We are outside the cave entrance. Engaging enemy forces in 3, 2, 1. The sound of gunfire erupted from the cave entrance, amplified by the stone walls into a thunderous cacophony. The 3 fighters in the cave immediately turned and ran back toward the opening, shouting to their comrades, their search forgotten in the face of the new threat. Vera waited until they were past her position, then moved quickly toward the cave and entranced herself, staying in the shadows, her pistol ready. Outside, the SEAL team had established positions around the cave entrance, engaging the enemy fighters who had been waiting outside. It was controlled chaos, precise 3-round bursts, and tactical movement. Brenneman saw her emerge from the cave and gestured sharply toward the extraction point 200 meters away. Lindstrom and another SEAL laid down covering fire, while Vera sprinted across open ground. She made it to cover, breathing hard, and Brenneman appeared beside her. His face was set in hard lines, anger barely contained beneath professional discipline. "We will discuss your decision to disobey orders later, Lieutenant. Right now, we need to move before they bring in reinforcements." The team withdrew in tactical bounds, 2 members moving while 4 provided cover, then switching. Professional, disciplined, exactly as they had been trained. The enemy fighters tried to pursue, but were driven back by accurate fire from the SEALs. Within 10 minutes, they had broken contact and were moving through terrain that made pursuit difficult. An hour later, they reached the extraction point where 2 helicopters waited. As Vera climbed aboard, she caught Lindstrom watching her with an expression that mixed respect and concern. Brenneman sat across from her, his jaw tight, saying nothing. The flight back to base was conducted in tense silence, the kind that came before difficult conversations and potentially career-ending decisions. The base was a collection of fortified buildings and temporary structures surrounded by concrete barriers and razor wire. Vera had been there for 3 weeks, but had spent most of that time at remote observation posts, so the main compound felt almost foreign. As the helicopters touched down, she could see other personnel watching, curious about the early return and the tension that radiated from the SEAL team. Brenneman did not speak to her during the flight or after they landed. He simply gestured toward the command building and walked ahead with rigid military bearing. Vera followed, her rifle case slung over her shoulder, knowing that whatever came next would not be pleasant. Lindstrom fell in beside her, his expression sympathetic. "The commander is furious," he said quietly. "You saved our lives again, took out a high-value target, and escaped against overwhelming odds. But you also disobeyed a direct order in the field. That is not something he can overlook, no matter how good the results were." "I know," Vera replied. She had known at the moment she squeezed the trigger. Some decisions came with costs that extended beyond the immediate tactical situation. This was one of them. They entered the command building and were directed to a briefing room. Brenneman was already there, along with Captain Thorne Castleton, the base commander. Castleton was older, mid-50s, with the weathered look of someone who had spent decades in uniform. He gestured for everyone to sit, then leaned back against the table with his arms crossed. "Commander Brenneman has briefed me on the situation," Castleton said, his voice carefully neutral. "Lieutenant Kensington, you engaged and eliminated 4 enemy combatants during Overwatch, then disobeyed a direct order to withdraw and instead engage a high-value target, resulting in your position being compromised and requiring emergency extraction. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir," Vera replied. "That is accurate." Castleton studied her for a long moment. "Commander Brenneman, what is your assessment of Lieutenant Kensington's actions?" Brenneman's jaw worked for a moment before he spoke. "Sir, Lieutenant Kensington's marksmanship was exceptional. Her tactical judgment regarding the Overwatch positions was sound. Her elimination of the high-value target was strategically significant. However, she directly disobeyed my order to withdraw, placed herself in unnecessary danger, and forced my team to conduct a high-risk extraction operation. By any standard of military discipline, her actions warrant formal reprimand at minimum. And yet, Castleton said slowly, your team is alive. The high-value target is dead. Enemy intelligence networks in this sector are now disrupted. Tactically and strategically, this operation was a success." He turned to Vera. "Lieutenant, why did you disobey the withdrawal order?" Vera met his gaze directly. "Sir, the target was about to escape. If he left that compound, we would have lost him and all the intelligence he carried. I assessed that eliminating him was worth the risk to my position and the potential complications to extraction. The mission objective was neutralizing a high-value target. I achieved that objective. By putting yourself and my team at risk," Brenneman interjected, his voice hard. "You made a unilateral decision that affected the entire operation without authorization. That is not how we operate, Lieutenant. We function as a team with clear command structure. When I give an order, I expect it to be followed. Even when following that order means mission failure," Vera asked quietly. The room fell silent. It was the fundamental question that every combat operator eventually faced. The tension between orders and outcomes, between discipline and effectiveness, between following the chain of command and doing what the situation required. Castleton straightened, his expression thoughtful. "Lieutenant Kensington, I have read your file. The complete file, not just the sanitized version that made it into your current assignment. I know about Afghanistan. I know about the incident that got you reassigned. I know that you have a history of making difficult decisions that save lives but create administrative headaches." He paused. "I also know that you are one of the most skilled snipers currently serving, and that your talents have been wasted in support roles because people in comfortable offices decided that your approach to problem-solving was too controversial." Vera said nothing. There was nothing to say that would not sound like making excuses. "Here's my problem," Castleton continued. "If I discipline you for disobeying orders, I'm sending a message that results do not matter, only compliance. If I ignore the breach of discipline, I am sending a message that orders are optional when individuals disagree with them. Neither of those outcomes is acceptable. He looked at Brenneman. Commander, what do you recommend? Brenneman was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with conflicting emotions. Finally, he spoke. Sir, Lieutenant Kensington's actions saved my team twice in 2 days. Her skills are exceptional, her tactical judgment is sound, and her willingness to take calculated risks is exactly what we need in this environment. However, she needs to operate within a command structure that gives her appropriate authority. She cannot be effective if she is constantly choosing between following orders and doing what the mission requires. Were you suggesting? Castleton asked. Brenneman glanced at Vera, then back to Castleton. Sir, I am suggesting that Lieutenant Kensington be formally attached to my team as our designated sniper for the duration of operations in this sector. Not as support personnel who occasionally provides overwatch, but as a full member of the team with tactical authority appropriate to her skills and experience. That way, when she sees a threat or opportunity, she has the authorization to act without waiting for permission that might arrive too late. Castleton raised an eyebrow. You want to bring her into your team officially, despite the fact that she has been reassigned to support duty specifically to keep her away from active combat operations. With respect, Sir, Brenneman replied, whoever made that decision was not thinking clearly. Putting someone with her capabilities in a pure observation role is like using a scalpel to hammer nails. It is a waste of a precision instrument. He turned to Vera. I'm still angry that you disobeyed my order, Lieutenant. But I'm also alive because you did. My entire team is alive because you were willing to take action when action was needed. That counts for something. Vera felt something shift in her chest. It was not quite hope, but it was close. For 3 years, she had been sidelined, told that her approach was wrong, that her willingness to act was a liability rather than an asset. And now, a SEAL commander was arguing that she should be given more authority, not less. Castleton walked to the window, looking out at the base compound. He was silent for a long time, clearly considering the implications. Finally, he turned back. Lieutenant Kensington, if I approve this attachment, you will be operating under Commander Brenneman's authority. That means when he gives you an order, you follow it. No exceptions. No unilateral decisions. No deciding that you know better than your commanding officer. Can you operate within those parameters? Vera considered the question carefully. Sir, if Commander Brenneman gives me an order that I believe will result in unnecessary casualties or mission failure, what is my recourse? You advise him of your concerns immediately and clearly, Castleton replied. You present your tactical assessment and recommend an alternative. But ultimately, he makes the command decisions. That is what command means. Can you accept that? It was the fundamental question about her entire career. Could she accept authority when she disagreed with it? Could she subordinate her judgment to someone else's? Could she trust another officer to make the right call when lives were at stake? She looked at Brenneman, saw the intelligence in his eyes, the experience in his bearing, the genuine concern for his team's welfare. This was not a bureaucrat making decisions from an office. This was a field commander who understood the realities of combat. Yes, sir, Vera said. I can accept that. If Commander Brenneman is willing to listen to my tactical assessments and consider my recommendations, I can operate under his authority. Brenneman nodded slowly. I am willing, Lieutenant, but understand that the final decision is mine. Always. If I tell you to hold fire, you hold fire. If I tell you to withdraw, you withdraw. Even if you disagree. Even if you think you know better. Are we clear? We are clear, Commander, Vera replied. Castleton looked between them, then nodded. Very well. Lieutenant Kensington, you are hereby temporarily attached to SEAL Team 7 under Commander Brenneman's authority for the duration of current operations in this sector. Your support duty assignment is suspended. Commander, she is your responsibility. If this arrangement does not work, we revisit the disciplinary question. Understood. Understood, sir, they both replied. The next 48 hours were a crash course in operating as part of SEAL Team. Vera found herself in mission planning sessions, tactical briefings, and training exercises that tested how well she could integrate with operators who had worked together for years. The team was professional but cautious, still evaluating whether she could truly function as part of their unit or if she would remain a lone wolf who happened to be attached to their operations. Lindstrom became her primary liaison, walking her through the team's communication protocols, hand signals, and tactical procedures. They spent hours on the range, with him observing her shooting and her watching how the team coordinated their movements and fire discipline. It was different from her previous assignments where she had operated independently or as part of conventional units. SEALs moved with a fluid precision that came from hundreds of missions together, and inserting herself into that dynamic required conscious adjustment. The rest of the team is still processing what happened, Lindstrom said during a break in training. Most of them have worked with snipers before, but not like you. Not someone who can consistently make shots at ranges they consider theoretical. You're making them reconsider what is possible. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Vera asked. Depends on whether you can do it when it really matters, Lindstrom replied with a slight grin. Yesterday proved you can handle pressure. Now I need to see if you can do it as part of the team instead of as an independent operator. The test came sooner than expected. Intelligence identified another high-value target. This one a weapons facilitator who was coordinating the smuggling of advanced explosives into the region. The target would be meeting with suppliers at a remote compound in 72 hours, and the window of opportunity was narrow. Brenneman called the team together for mission planning, and for the first time, Vera was included from the beginning rather than being briefed separately. The compound is here, Brenneman said, pointing to the topographical map spread across the table. Single road access, surrounded by open terrain for 300 meters in all directions. The target will have security, probably 6 to 8 fighters with automatic weapons and RPGs. Our objective is to capture him alive if possible, eliminate him if necessary, and secure any intelligence materials he is carrying. What about Overwatch positions? One of the team members asked. That open terrain makes approach risky. Brenneman turned to Vera. Lieutenant, your assessment. Vera studied the map, calculating distances and angles. There's a ridgeline here, approximately 1,200 meters from the compound. It offers clear line of sight and sufficient elevation for effective overwatch. I can provide cover for your approach and engage any security forces that threaten the team. She traced potential routes with her finger. Primary concern is this section here, where you will be exposed for approximately 40 meters. If they have alert security, that is where you are most vulnerable. Can you cover that section from the ridgeline? Brenneman asked. Yes, Commander. 1,200 meters is well within effective range. I can engage any threats that emerge during your crossing. She paused, then added, I recommend we also have a contingency for vehicle-mounted weapons. If they have a technical with a heavy machine gun, it could complicate extraction even with sniper support. Lindstrom nodded. Good point. We will bring anti-armor capability. What about your extraction, Lieutenant? If things go loud, that ridgeline will be exposed to counterfire. I will establish a secondary position here. Vera indicated another point on the map. If I need to displace under fire, I can withdraw along this ravine to the backup extraction point. It adds distance but provides cover. Brenneman studied the plan, then looked around the table. Other concerns or suggestions? The team discussed logistics, timing, and contingencies for another hour. Vera noticed that they were including her naturally in the conversation now, asking her opinion on sight lines and engagement distances, incorporating her capabilities into their tactical planning. She was becoming part of the team rather than an attachment. 2 days later, they were in position. Vera had occupied the ridgeline just after midnight, using darkness to conceal her approach. The compound below was quiet, with only 2 guards visible on patrol. She had counted 4 vehicles, confirming that additional personnel were inside. Through her night vision scope, she methodically documented defensive positions, guard patterns, and potential threats. Overwatch in position, she transmitted. 2 guards on patrol for vehicles present. Compound appears to be expecting guests, but not expecting trouble. Copy, Overwatch, Brenneman replied. We are beginning approach. ETA to target 20 minutes. Vera watched as the SEAL team moved through the darkness like shadows. They were using the terrain perfectly, staying low in a dried stream bed that offered concealment. She tracked their progress while simultaneously monitoring the compound for any changes in security posture. This was her role now, not just shooting, but being the eyes that saw everything, the presence that covered the gaps, the insurance policy against the unexpected. Halfway through their approach, movement caught her attention. A vehicle approaching on the access road, headlights cutting through the darkness. She zoomed in, identifying it as a technical with a mounted heavy machine gun. 3 fighters visible in the truck bed, weapons ready. This was not a routine patrol. This was reinforcement or security for the meeting. Command, Overwatch. Vehicle approaching from the south, technical with crew-served weapon and 3 armed personnel. ETA to compound approximately 5 minutes. Can you engage the vehicle? Brenneman asked. Negative, Commander. Engaging now would alert the compound and compromise your approach. Recommend you accelerate timeline or abort until vehicle situation is resolved. There was a pause while Brenneman considered options. If we abort, we lose the target. He will disappear again, and we may not get another opportunity. Can you engage the vehicle once we breach the compound, so they cannot use it to reinforce or escape? Affirmative, Vera replied. Once you initiate breach, I can disable the vehicle and engage personnel. But be advised, gunfire will alert additional forces in the area. This will become a running extraction once shooting starts. Understood. All elements, prepare to go loud on my mark. Overwatch. You're authorized to engage any threats once we breach. Target priority is crew-served weapons and armed personnel attempting to reinforce the compound. Vera adjusted her position, settling into the shooting stance she had practiced thousands of times. The vehicle had reached the compound now and was parking near the entrance. The fighters were dismounting, stretching after their drive, unaware that they had minutes left to live. Below, the SEAL team was stacked up outside the compound wall, ready to breach. She centered her crosshairs on the heavy machine gun, specifically the ammunition feed mechanism. Disabling the weapon was more important than killing the gunner. A dead gunner could be replaced. A broken weapon could not. She took a breath, held it, and waited. All elements stand by, Brenneman transmitted. Breach in 3, 2, 1, execute. The explosive charge blew the compound door inward, and the SEAL team flowed through like water. Vera squeezed her trigger, and the heavy machine gun's feed mechanism exploded in a shower of metal fragments. She transitioned immediately to the fighters near the vehicle, dropping 2 before they could react. The third dove for cover behind the truck, and she put a round through the engine block for good measure, ensuring the vehicle would not be driving anywhere. The compound erupted in gunfire. The SEALs were engaging multiple targets inside, moving with coordinated precision. Vera scanned for external threats, her scope sweeping the perimeter. There, 2 fighters emerging from a building she had not identified as occupied, both carrying RPGs. They were moving toward the breach point, trying to get an angle on the SEAL team inside. Command, 2 hostiles with RPGs moving to flank your position from the east, Vera transmitted. Engaging now. She fired twice in rapid succession. Both fighters dropped, and the RPGs clattered harmlessly to the ground. Inside the compound, Brenneman's voice came through clipped and controlled. Target secured. Prepare for extraction. All elements pull back. Vera continued scanning, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. The mission was not over until everyone was safe. Movement on the southern ridge caught her attention, exactly where she would have positioned a security element if she were defending this compound. 3 fighters, 1 with a radio, clearly calling for backup. They had not engaged yet, were probably waiting for orders or reinforcements. Command, secondary security element on southern ridge. 3 personnel, 1 with communications. They're calling for support. Can you suppress them? Brenneman asked. She fired 3 times, and the fighters scattered. The one with the radio went down. Affirmative. Communications eliminated. Remaining hostiles are suppressed, but not neutralized. Good enough. All elements, moving to extraction point. Overwatch, prepare to displace on my command. The extraction went smoothly, with Vera displacing from her position and linking up with the team at the rally point. They moved quickly through the darkness, putting distance between themselves and the compound before enemy reinforcements could arrive. The captured weapons facilitator was zip-tied and hooded, carried between two SEALs who moved with practiced efficiency. Intelligence materials had been secured in waterproof bags, and the team's mood was cautiously optimistic. Back at base, the debriefing was thorough. Brenneman went through every phase of the operation, asking for input from each team member, identifying what worked and what could be improved. When it came to Vera's performance, Lindstrom was the first to speak. The Overwatch support was exceptional, Commander. Lieutenant Kensington identified threats before they became critical, engaged with precision that allowed us to maintain momentum, and her suppression of the secondary security element prevented them from coordinating an effective response. She operated exactly as an integrated team member should. Brenneman nodded, then turned to Vera. Your target prioritization was sound. Taking out the crew-served weapon first, then the RPG teams, then communications. That is exactly the sequence I would have wanted. Good work, Lieutenant. It was a simple acknowledgement, but coming from Brenneman, it carried weight. Vera felt something she had not experienced in 3 years. Not just acceptance, but validation. She was not just being tolerated or managed. She was being recognized as a valuable member of a team that respected competence above all else. The captured facilitator provided significant intelligence during interrogation. Names, locations, smuggling routes, and most importantly, information about a major weapons shipment scheduled to arrive in 5 days. The shipment included advanced explosives and anti-aircraft missiles that could dramatically escalate enemy capabilities in the region. Stopping that shipment became the immediate priority. Captain Castleton called an expanded planning session that included Brenneman's team, intelligence analysts, and senior officers. The weapons convoy would be traveling through a remote mountain pass, the only viable route for heavy vehicles in that area. It presented an opportunity, but also significant challenges. The pass is a natural choke point, one of the intelligence analysts explained, highlighting the route on a digital map. However, it is also highly defensible. The convoy will have significant security, probably 20 to 30 fighters with vehicle-mounted weapons. There are also reports of technical experts accompanying the shipment, possibly foreign advisors helping to train local forces on the new weapon systems. Brenneman studied the map intently. What are the recommended engagement options? The analyst pulled up several tactical scenarios. Option 1 is an airstrike. We eliminate the convoy from altitude, minimal risk to our forces. Option 2 is a ground ambush with explosive devices and small arms fire. Option 3 is a precision strike targeting only the weapons vehicles while attempting to minimize casualties. What is the problem with Option 1? Castleton asked. Collateral damage concerns, sir, the analyst replied. The pass runs through populated areas. An airstrike risks civilian casualties and will certainly destroy structures. Additionally, we lose any opportunity to capture intelligence or personnel for interrogation. And Option 2. High risk to our forces, the analyst said. Setting up an effective ambush requires getting close to a heavily defended convoy in terrain that offers limited escape routes. If the engagement goes wrong, extraction becomes extremely difficult. Castleton turned to Brenneman. Your assessment, Commander. Brenneman was quiet for a moment, his eyes moving between the map and his team. Sir, I believe we need a hybrid approach. We position Lieutenant Kensington at extreme Overwatch range, somewhere in this area. He pointed to a ridgeline overlooking the pass. She can engage critical targets, specifically the vehicle commanders and weapons operators, creating chaos and confusion. Simultaneously, we position explosive devices at strategic points along the pass. When the convoy is disabled and disorganized, my team moves in to secure the weapons and any high-value personnel. One of the senior officers frowned. Commander, you are asking a single sniper to engage a heavily defended convoy from, 2,000 meters or more? That is not realistic. With respect, sir, Brenneman replied, Lieutenant Kensington has consistently demonstrated the ability to make precise shots at ranges most people consider impossible. I have seen it myself, multiple times. If she says she can engage effectively at that distance, I believe her. All eyes turned to Vera. She stepped forward and studied the map, calculating distances, elevation changes, wind patterns based on the terrain. The ridgeline Brenneman indicated was approximately 2,300 meters from the center of the pass. Extreme range, but not impossible. The real challenge would be the number of targets and the speed required to neutralize multiple threats before they could organize an effective response. Commander, if I position here, Vera said, indicating a specific point on the ridgeline, I will have clear line of sight to approximately 800 meters of the pass. That gives me a window to engage as the convoy moves through. Primary targets would be vehicle commanders, heavy weapons operators, and anyone attempting to coordinate a response. At that range with moving vehicles, I estimate I can engage one target every 15 to 20 seconds, accounting for aim time and changing positions. How many targets can you neutralize before they identify your position and take effective countermeasures? Castleton asked. Conservatively, 6 to 8 targets before they begin effective suppression fire or attempt to reposition to engage me, Vera replied. Optimally, 10 to 12 if they are slow to react or if the initial confusion is significant enough to delay their response. The senior officer who had questioned the plan spoke up again. And if they have a trained sniper in the convoy, someone who can identify your position and engage you while you're focused on other targets. Then I will need to identify and eliminate that threat first, Vera said calmly. Or I will need to displace rapidly after initial engagement to avoid counter-sniper fire. That is the risk inherent in any Overwatch operation. Brenneman interjected. Sir, every tactical option carries risks. Airstrikes risk civilian casualties and destroy intelligence value. Close ambushes risk our personnel in sustained firefights. Long-range precision engagement allows us to disrupt and disable the convoy with minimal risk to our forces and maximum opportunity to secure the weapons and capture personnel intact. Lieutenant Kensington's capabilities give us an option that normally would not be available. Castleton studied the map for a long moment, then looked at Vera. Lieutenant, be honest with me. Can you do what Commander Brenneman is suggesting? Can you engage multiple targets at extreme range, under time pressure, while potentially facing counter-sniper threats? Vera met his gaze directly. Sir, I have made shots at these distances under worse conditions. The variable factors are weather, which we can monitor and plan for, and enemy response time, which we can minimize through coordination with Commander Brenneman's ground element. If the explosives are positioned correctly and detonated at the right moment, the convoy will be disorganized when I begin engagement. That gives me the best chance of achieving maximum effect before they can respond effectively. And if something goes wrong, Castleton pressed. If the weather changes, if they have better training than we expect, if you miss critical shots, then we adapt, Vera replied. I displace to secondary positions. Commander Brenneman's team adjusts their approach, and we execute alternate plans. But, sir, the biggest mistake we can make is underestimating what is possible and choosing a less effective option because we do not believe in our own capabilities. The room was silent for a moment. Then Castleton nodded slowly. Very well, Commander Brenneman. You are authorized to proceed with the hybrid approach. Lieutenant Kensington provides long-range precision fire. You position explosives and conduct ground assault once the convoy is disabled. Intelligence team will provide updated information on convoy composition and timing. This operation is critical. Those weapons cannot be allowed to reach enemy forces. Understood, sir, Brenneman replied. As the meeting broke up and people filed out, Lindstrom approached Vera with a slight grin. You know, Lieutenant, when you first showed up at that observation post, I thought you were just another support officer counting days until rotation home. I have never been more wrong about someone in my entire career. Vera allowed herself a small smile. I get that a lot, Chief. The next 72 hours would be spent in intensive preparation. Reconnaissance of the target area, weather analysis, equipment checks, and coordination rehearsals. But for the first time in 3 years, Vera felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she had been trained to do, with people who understood and valued her capabilities. The bureaucrats who had sidelined her seemed very far away. What mattered now was the mission, the team, and the impossible shot that everyone was counting on her to make. The ridgeline was cold at dawn, wind cutting across the exposed rock with enough force to affect bullet trajectory by several inches at 2,300 meters. Vera had been in position since 0200, using darkness to mask her approach and establish a hide that would be invisible from the pass below. She had calculated every variable she could control: distance, elevation, temperature, barometric pressure. The variables she could not control, wind and human reaction time, she would have to manage in real time. Through her scope, she watched the sun rise over the mountains, slowly illuminating the pass below. It was beautiful in a stark way, all gray stone and deep shadows. In 3 hours, that beauty would be shattered by violence and chaos. The convoy was on schedule according to the latest intelligence report. 22 vehicles confirmed, including 5 carrying the weapons shipment. Estimated 40 to 50 fighters providing security, plus the foreign technical advisors who would be high-value capture targets if the operation succeeded. Overwatch in position, she transmitted. Conditions are acceptable. Wind gusting from a northwest at 8 to 12 miles per hour. Visibility is good. Standing by for convoy arrival. Copy, Overwatch, Brenneman replied. Ground element is positioned. Explosives are set. We are ready to execute on your signal. The waiting was always the hardest part. Vera had learned years ago to control her mind during these moments, to avoid dwelling on what could go wrong, to simply exist in the present and trust her training. She ran through her engagement sequence mentally. Vehicle commanders first, then heavy weapons operators, then anyone attempting to organize a response. If a counter-sniper revealed themselves, they became immediate priority. 15 to 20 seconds between shots. 12 targets, if everything went perfectly. Enough to create chaos and confusion that would allow Brenneman's team to move in. Movement on the far end of the pass caught her attention. The convoy was arriving early. She checked her watch. 20 minutes ahead of schedule. That was not ideal, but it was manageable. She keyed her radio. Command, convoy is entering the pass now. 22 vehicles confirmed. Lead vehicle is a technical with mounted weapon. They're moving at approximately 20 miles per hour. Understood, Overwatch. We are tracking. Hold for my signal to engage. Vera watched as the convoy snaked through the pass. Vehicles maintaining tactical spacing. Security clearly alert. These are not amateurs. They had vehicle-mounted weapons positioned for mutual support, fighters scanning the ridgelines with binoculars, a lead vehicle probing for ambushes. Whoever was commanding this convoy knew what they were doing. The convoy reached the kill zone, the section of the pass where Brenneman had positioned his explosives. Vera could see his team now, through her scope, hidden in positions that allowed them to both detonate the charges and assault immediately afterward. Everything was coming together. Just a few more seconds. Command, convoy is in position, Vera transmitted. Lead vehicle is directly over primary charge. All weapon vehicles are within kill zone. Execute, Brenneman ordered. The explosion was massive, tearing through the lead vehicle and sending debris cascading across the pass. Secondary charges detonated in sequence, disabling 3 more vehicles and creating a wall of smoke and fire. The convoy immediately halted, fighters jumping from vehicles and taking cover, weapons training on the surrounding terrain. Someone was shouting orders, trying to organize a defense. Vera found him through her scope, a tall man with a radio, clearly his senior commander. She fired. The commander dropped, and confusion rippled through the enemy forces. She transitioned to the nearest heavy weapons operator, a fighter manning a vehicle-mounted machine gun. Her second shot caught him in the chest. The third target was another commander figure, this one rallying fighters near the center of the convoy. He fell before he could finish his sentence. 4 shots, 4 targets down, and the enemy still had not identified her position. They were firing wildly at the hillsides, at shadows, at anything that might conceal an attacker. Vera found her fifth target, a sniper climbing onto a disabled vehicle for a better vantage point. She dropped him before he could establish position. 6, 7, 8. Each shot was deliberate, controlled, precise. Vehicle commanders, weapons operators, anyone who looked like they knew what they were doing. On her ninth shot, everything changed. She fired at a technical driver, trying to maneuver his vehicle out of the kill zone. In a split second before her bullet arrived, something impacted the rock 3 inches from her head. Counter-sniper. Someone had finally identified her position and was engaging. She rolled left, abandoning her primary position, as 2 more rounds cracked past where she had been. Command, taking counter-sniper fire, Vera transmitted. Displacing to secondary position. She low-crawled along the ridgeline, using terrain to mask her movement. Behind her, more rounds impacted her former position. Whoever was shooting knew their business. That was closer than she would have liked. "Can you identify the counter-sniper?" Brenneman asked. His team was moving now, assaulting through the confused enemy forces, but the counter-sniper could make their advance extremely costly. "Negative, still locating," Vera replied. She reached her secondary position and carefully raised her scope, scanning the convoy for the source of the incoming fire. There, muzzle flash from inside an armored vehicle, shooting through a firing port. Smart. Protected position, good angle on her primary hide. But the firing port limited his field of view, and from her new position, she had an angle he could not cover. Counter-sniper identified. She transmitted. Armored vehicle, center of convoy. Engaging now. She aimed for the firing port, a target maybe 8 inches wide at 2,300 meters. It was an absurdly difficult shot, the kind that required perfect calculation and a measure of luck. She accounted for wind, for the slight angle, for the movement of heated air rising from the burning vehicles. Then she fired. The counter-sniper's rifle went silent. Either she had hit him directly, or her round had fragmented inside the vehicle and created enough damage to take him out of the fight. Either way, the immediate threat was neutralized. She transitioned back to supporting the ground assault, engaging targets that threatened Brenneman's advance. An enemy fighter with an RPG. A group attempting to rally behind a vehicle. A commander trying to call for reinforcements. The firefight lasted another 8 minutes before the remaining enemy forces broke and fled, abandoning the convoy and the precious weapons shipment they had been protecting. Brenneman's team secured the vehicles, detained the wounded, and began cataloging the captured materials. The foreign advisors were found hiding in one of the armored vehicles, all 3 of them surrendering immediately once they realized organized resistance had collapsed. Overwatch, ceasefire, Brenneman transmitted. Convoy is secured. 12 enemy Kia, 8 detained including the 3 foreign advisors. All 5 weapons vehicles are intact and secured. Outstanding work, Lieutenant. Vera lowered her rifle and allowed herself to breathe normally for the first time in 20 minutes. Her hands were rock steady, her heartbeat already returning to its normal rhythm. 13 shots fired, 12 confirmed hits, 1 counter-sniper neutralized under fire. Not perfect, but close enough. She began breaking down her position, preparing to link up with the team for extraction. As she descended from the ridgeline, she could see the captured convoy clearly. Vehicles disabled, but salvageable, weapons secured, enemy forces dead or detained. It was a textbook successful operation, the kind that would be studied in tactical courses and briefed to senior leadership. And it had worked because a team of professional operators had trusted a sniper whom most people thought should be sitting safely behind binoculars at an observation post. She reached the pass and found Brenneman directing the exploitation of the site, his team efficiently processing the capture materials and preparing wounded for evacuation. He saw her approaching and walked over, his expression mixing satisfaction and respect. "That counter-sniper shot," he said. 8-inch target at 2,300 meters through a firing port. "That is not just skill, Lieutenant. That is art." "It was necessity, Commander," Vera replied. "He was threatening your team's advance. I eliminated the threat." Brenneman smiled. Always practical. I like that. He gestured toward the captured vehicles. We recovered advanced explosives, anti-aircraft missiles, and enough intelligence materials to keep analysts busy for months. Those 3 foreign advisors are already talking, trying to negotiate reduced sentences. This operation is going to have strategic impact across the entire region. Lindstrom approached, grinning widely. Lieutenant, I counted 13 shots. How many hits? 12 confirmed, Vera replied. 1 miss when I was displacing under counter-sniper fire. Only 12 out of 13, Lindstrom said with mock disappointment. You are slipping, ma'am. He laughed and clapped her on the shoulder. That was the most impressive display of marksmanship I have ever witnessed. You just made every sniper in the command look like amateurs. The after-action briefing took place 3 days later in a room filled with senior officers from across the base. Captain Castleton presided, but representatives from higher command had flown in specifically to hear about the convoy operation. The captured weapons and intelligence materials were already being exploited by specialist teams, and early reports suggested the impact would be felt throughout the region for months. Commander Brenneman stood at the front of the room, walking through the operation phase by phase. When he reached the description of a long-range precision fire that had disabled the convoy's leadership and weapons capabilities, he turned to Vera. Lieutenant Kensington, would you describe your engagement sequence and the challenges you faced? Vera stood, feeling the weight of attention from every officer in the room. She was not comfortable with this kind of spotlight, preferred to let her work speak for itself, but she understood that these briefings served a purpose beyond just documenting success. They shaped how operations were planned, how capabilities were understood, how decisions were made at levels far above tactical implementation. Sir, I established overwatch position at 2,300 meters from the target area with clear line of sight to the kill zone. Upon detonation of charges, I engaged 12 targets in sequence over approximately 8 minutes. Primary targets were vehicle commanders, heavy weapons operators, and anyone attempting to organize defensive response. The enemy employed a counter-sniper who identified my position after my 8th shot. I displaced under fire to a secondary position and neutralized the counter-sniper before continuing support of the ground assault. One of the visiting officers, a colonel with an impressive array of ribbons, leaned forward. Lieutenant, I have reviewed the operation report. 2,300 meters is extreme range for precision fire. Engaging moving targets, vehicle-mounted weapons, and a protected counter-sniper under time pressure. That level of performance is exceptional. Where did you receive your training? Multiple schools over several years, sir, Vera replied. Advanced marksmanship, sniper instructor course, specialized training with Tier 1 elements. She paused, then added, and extensive field experience in Afghanistan and other theaters. The colonel studied her for a long moment. Lieutenant Kensington. That name was familiar, so I looked up your file. The complete file. You're the operator from the Afghanistan advisory mission. The one who was reassigned after the wall shooting incident. Yes, sir, Vera said quietly. That is correct. The colonel sat back, his expression thoughtful. I was part of the review board that examined that incident. I remember the debate. Some wanted you court-martialed for engaging targets without visual confirmation. Others argued you had saved 30 lives by acting on tactical intuition and pattern recognition. The compromise was reassignment to support duties where your particular approach would be less controversial. He looked around the room, then back at Vera. Sitting here now, reviewing this convoy operation and the previous actions over the past 2 weeks, I find myself wondering if that compromise was actually a mistake. You have demonstrated exceptional judgment, precision under pressure, and the ability to operate effectively as part of a team. Those are not liabilities. Those are exactly the qualities we need in our most capable operators. Castleton spoke up. Sir, I reached the same conclusion, which is why I am recommending that Lieutenant Kensington be permanently reassigned to special operations support rather than conventional support duties. Her capabilities are too valuable to waste on routine observation posts. The colonel nodded slowly. I concur with that recommendation. In fact, I will take it a step further. He turned to Vera. Lieutenant, How would you feel about instructor duty at the sniper school? Not as punishment or lateral reassignment, but as a senior instructor helping to train the next generation of precision marksmen. Your field experience combined with your demonstrated skills would be invaluable. Vera was quiet for a moment, processing the offer. 3 years ago, she had been pushed aside, told that her judgment was questionable, that her methods were too aggressive, that she needed to be managed rather than utilized. Now, she was being offered a position of respect and responsibility, recognition that her capabilities were assets rather than problems. "Sir, I would be honored," she said, "but I would request one condition." The colonel raised an eyebrow. "What condition?" "That I maintain certification for field operations," Vera replied. "I am willing to teach, to pass on what I have learned. But I do not want to become purely an instructor who has lost touch with operational reality. If I am training people for combat, I need to remain current in combat myself." The colonel smiled. "That is exactly the attitude we need." "Agreed. You will be assigned as senior instructor with maintained operational certification. When your expertise is needed in the field, you will deploy. When you're not deployed, you will train others to be as capable as you are." Brenneman stood. "Sir, I would also like to request that Lieutenant Kensington be available for attachment to my team for future operations in this theater. She has integrated seamlessly with my unit, and her Overwatch capabilities have proven critical to our success." "Noted, Commander," the colonel replied. "Lieutenant Kensington will be available for special operations support as needed." He looked around the room. Any other questions or comments regarding this operation? Lindstrom raised his hand. "Sir, if I may, I have been doing this for 18 years, worked with some of the best snipers in the military. What Lieutenant Kensington accomplished on that ridgeline was the single most impressive display of precision marksmanship I have ever witnessed. 12 hits at extreme range under time pressure, neutralizing a counter sniper, all while supporting a complex ground assault. That kind of performance deserves formal recognition." The colonel nodded. "I agree, Chief. Lieutenant Kensington, you will be recommended for the Bronze Star for valor and exceptional performance in combat operations. Your actions directly contributed to the success of a strategically significant mission and likely saved numerous coalition lives." Vera felt something tighten in her chest. Recognition had never been her goal. She had simply wanted to do the job she had been trained for, to use her skills where they mattered. But standing here, seeing the respect in the faces around her, understanding that her approach was finally being valued rather than questioned, it meant more than she had expected. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. The briefing continued for another hour, covering logistics, intelligence exploitation, and planning for future operations. When it finally concluded, Vera found herself surrounded by team members offering congratulations. Even officers who had questioned her capabilities during planning were now acknowledging the results she had delivered. Brenneman pulled her aside as the room emptied. "Lieutenant, I want you to know something. When I first heard about you being assigned to that observation post, I thought it was a waste. Another bureaucratic decision that put paperwork ahead of capability. I was right about it being a waste, but wrong about almost everything else." He extended his hand. "You are one of the finest operators I have ever worked with. If you ever need anything, a reference, a deployment opportunity, or just someone who understands what you do, you call me." Vera shook his hand, recognizing the offer for what it was. A door permanently opened. A relationship built on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. A commander who saw her as an asset rather than a problem. "Thank you, Commander. Working with your team has reminded me why I joined the military in the first place. Not for recognition or awards, but to be part of something larger. To do work that matters with people who understand the cost and value of that work." As she left the briefing room and walked across the base compound, Vera reflected on how much had changed in just 2 weeks. She had arrived as a sideline support officer, dismissed and underutilized. She was leaving as a recognized expert, respected by operators who had initially barely noticed her existence. The impossible shots, the disobeyed orders, the risks taken, all of it had led to this moment of validation. Finch was waiting at the observation post equipment depot, helping to process her gear for shipment to her new assignment. He looked up as she approached, his young face breaking into a grin. "Lieutenant, I heard about the assignment to instructor duty. That is incredible. Though I have to admit, I will miss having you around. It has been educational watching you work." Vera smiled. "You did well, Corporal. When things got complicated, you stayed professional and kept communications running smoothly. That matters more than most people realize." "So what happens now?" Finch asked. "You head off to train the next generation of snipers." "Something like that," Vera replied. "Though I suspect I will be back in the field more often than the assignment paperwork suggests. There always seem to be situations that require someone willing to take the hard shots." If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know your favorite moment or character. Maybe you have witnessed someone with hidden skills finally get the recognition they deserved, or perhaps you have been underestimated yourself. We would love to hear about it. Vera looked out across the base, toward the mountains where she had spent the past 2 weeks proving that capability mattered more than assumptions. That skill would eventually be recognized regardless of bureaucratic obstacles, that sometimes the quiet professional in the background was exactly the person everyone needed. She had been called Ghost once, a name earned through impossible shots and silent competence. Now she would teach others to earn their own names, their own respect, their own place among those who did the hard work that kept others safe. The observation post on a ridge seemed very far away now. Just another chapter in a career that had been defined by defying expectations and delivering results when it mattered most. And somewhere out there, another mission was waiting, another impossible shot that needed to be made. Another moment where skill and courage would prove that the quiet ones were sometimes the most dangerous of all.